Have you ever felt like you're failing as a person and a parent? Me too, and here's how I got over it. So there's a thing that I didn't know when I was having a kid, or two kids in the end, is that there's this thing called mummy guilt, and I use that because it applied to me, but this is no doubt something that a lot of parents experience. So this is the guilt that we feel when we're forced to split our time between our businesses and our babies. And I also know that our businesses sometimes have been our babies. That was certainly the case for me. I had been owning my own business for quite a few years before I got pregnant and had my babies, and then all of a sudden this thing that no one warned me about happened, which was mummy guilt or parent guilt. So what it is that we feel bad. So we've got a kid on the side and we've got a business on the other side. And if we're working, we feel like we should be with our child. And if we're with our child, we feel like we should be working. And it's a no-win situation, and it is entirely self-driven. It's not to say that there aren't a lot of pressures from society causing this, but we're allowing it to be coming from us, that we're putting that pressure on ourselves, that we should be this ideal picture of the perfect parent as well as the perfect business owner. And this is not fair to us, and it's not fair to other parents who we then go, yeah, well, you're supposed to be the perfect everything. So let's have a talk about that. These days, a lot of us don't have the option to be a stay-at-home or a full-time parent, because sometimes you will work from home, but having babies and toddlers and all the rest of it while you're trying to work as well, it's not really successful. I've been there, I've tried that, it doesn't work that well. So we get this compounded guilt. Again, we're trying to work, but we're trying to spend time with our kids. Neither of them we're doing particularly successfully, and we are just killing ourselves with the guilt of why can't we be perfect, and why can't we be like those people on Instagram or those business leaders that we see in the news that they have 17 children and they're amazing and they're successful. We don't see the downside of that. And I'm quite sure, unless there's some form of psychopath, they also experience this as well. And it's got to be something that we release ourselves from. So how do we do that? This is something that is really ingrained, and me talking to you for 10 minutes is not going to solve it, but I'm really hopeful that it will help you start to unpack this, because it really, really is something that is something we shouldn't be carrying with us. So here's what I found helps, is looking at the positives. There's always a compromise that we make. We might have worked for other people in the past, and we might look back on that and go, oh, well, if we still had a job instead of running our own business, then, it wouldn't be like this. I wouldn't feel this way. But you still would, because you would still have to spend time away from your children. And then if you're like most people who are employed these days, most of the time there's pressure on us in a job to put in extra hours, or just do that little bit of extra overtime, or come in that little bit of extra time before the workday starts, just to get everything set up perfectly before your day starts. And so you're still going to have that guilt. But with any choice, there is always a choice that you make, and you actively make a choice to not do the other thing. And this is something that really does link into this parent guilt. We have our children, and we then have to choose how we then afford to look after them. And that choice, there is not a right or a wrong choice. What I'm really trying to get across here, sometimes in a little bit of a clumsy way, is that there are choices we have to make. So we don't have to make a choice to build a business. We could choose to go and have a job. But the economic reality for most people these days is they have to choose some way of earning an income. Otherwise, they're not going to eat and they're not going to have a roof over their head. And so we have to make a choice regardless of what that is. So you need to let yourself go of the guilt around that. You don't have an option. If you want to be able to pay for food and medical care and education for children, you are going to need to be earning an income in some way. So forget that. You have to do that. It is not your fault. You should not feel guilty for that. But how do we now move past that and find the way to get rid of the bitter guilt that is going to still sit there? So what I found is to look at the positive aspects of the things. So how do we move past that guilt and get rid of it? There's a few ways to do that, and it really is, as I've said, it's the choosing to focus on the positives that you bring, especially to your children, because I found that as a mum, the guilt was mainly around what was I doing to my children by working those long hours, because I was working very, very long hours, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, quite commonly. So what I did was I flipped that and I said, well, what am I teaching them? What example am I setting for them by doing that? Now, I don't recommend 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. I really don't. It's a really fast track to burnout. But that was my reality at the time. So how was I able to look at that as a positive? It was teaching them what a work ethic looks like. A crazy one, but a work ethic. It meant that they saw that if they want something, and if they want something a bit different, to have more than they would have if I was going to work for somebody else, if I wanted to have the freedom to occasionally take the time off to do the things with them, the school things, then it meant that they could see I was prepared to work really, really hard to get that for them. And they grow up knowing that you don't just get something for nothing. So to me, that was a really important lesson that I was teaching them by example, not just by my words. Then the other thing to recognize now in 2025 is that the world of employment and business is going to be changing hugely over the next few years. And none of us really can say how that is going to be. But one thing that self-employment will teach you is grit and, well, two things, grit and resilience, and the ability to adapt to whatever comes your way. Because in business, you have to. Otherwise, you're dead in the water. And so applying that to what will be a good example for kids is seeing that adaptability. If they hear you talking about, oh gosh, this challenge came up at work and we had to suddenly figure out a different way to deal with it, that's a great example of adaptability to set your kids, because they are going to face probably even more challenges than we have faced. And so that's a really, really good way. No matter what you do, though, there will always have to be that compromise that I talked about. So don't beat yourself up for having to compromise on what you want to do, because unless you are a millionaire sitting somewhere on a beach with your kids and you're able to do all the things for them that you ever wanted to, which probably involves them not being able to do some things that they want to do, you're never going to get away from the fact that life is entirely compromise almost 100% of the time. Even the waking and sleeping. By sleeping, we are compromising on the amount of time that we've got awake. It's a fundamental biological reality that we have to make that compromise, but it is a fundamental compromise. So don't beat yourself up for having to do things. And so I'd really like you to have a look at how much you're punishing yourself mentally for not being able to do all the things in the way that you want to do, the fact that you are having to compromise, and really to recognize you cannot get away from compromise. I would like you to get rid of that guilt, because you do have control over that. And I would love it if you could go and hug your kids and tell them how much you love them. And I'd also love you to comment down down below how you might suggest other people can do this, or if you've managed to get past the parent guilt yourself. I would love to hear how you did that. So please do feel free to comment, look us up on social media. I'd love to chat with you and find out how you managed to get over the parent guilt.